Hey, what's up, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just start with them, right? Deshaun Watson coming back. We got a ton of questions this week. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and on YouTube if you want to make sure you have a chance to ask these questions. So subscribe and notify yourself on YouTube. Hit that bell. And on Twitter, obviously, you just got to follow me at QnA. I post there. And make sure you got your noties on. Yeah, make sure you got your noties on. Or at least just follow me on Twitter. I don't recommend having your notifications on when somebody tweets because it's too easy to tweet. You get too many notifications and you just delete the app. But do follow me on Twitter. Notifications for YouTube because I only post one time a day on YouTube. But that being said, Pierce James with a question who says, you talked about QB floors when evaluating them. We all know about Deshaun Watson's ceiling, but what do you think his floor will be after taking time off? I don't think his floor changes much from what it was. I will say this, me personally, I've changed in some of my evaluations when it comes to floor because I just, seeing what I see now, believe that a player's floor can be as low as anybody's, right? Like there was a floor that we thought we had on Baker Mayfield. He lost all his confidence and whatever happened with him, and he hit a lower floor than I thought he was capable of, right? Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. The floor limit doesn't seem to exist, right? There is no limit on how bad you can be at something because this is very hard, is pretty much my point. So the floor, it could be anywhere. That doesn't mean he's likely to hit it, right? But that's just saying every quarterback has a lower floor. The more I evaluate this, right, I think the ideal of somebody with a high floor is kind of just a myth, right? There are just ceilings in this world. There's not really a floor. The floor is zero, like absolutely awful, not in the league. That's the floor for everybody. But the ceiling is the ceiling. So I think when we look at this as far as evaluations for players and quarterbacks, and we look at it as floors and ceilings, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice because there's the floor for an NFL player is not being in the NFL. That's the floor for every single NFL player because it's possible for every single NFL player. Now, certain circumstances might have to pop up for it, or, it could just be that they're not that good. But I don't know if a floor really exists for any player. But Deshaun, I think it's likely he performs at the similar level that he has throughout his career. The fact is he's never been a bad quarterback in the NFL. He won't be a bad quarterback. He's always been an above average good quarterback, right? Like Baker Mayfield 2020 year kind of has been his statistical floor in the NFL. But his actual floor, everybody got the same actual floor, is kind of where I'm leaning to. So maybe that just changes how I discuss this to better communicate what I mean. But yeah, that's kind of how I've been on this thing, man. Because like this year has been illuminating on the fact that the floor don't really exist like you think it does. Frankie says, so with Lamar, so what do you think's going to happen with Lamar? I know a lot of people would have thought he would go to Miami, but it seems like Tua is there to stay. Is Baltimore going to back up the Brinks truck for Lamar? This Tua thing's interesting because one, I don't think Miami can get Lamar, right? Like if this thing goes to a transition tag or a trade situation, which is where it's looking like it's headed, it's not like Miami has the resources to be competitive in either of these situations, right? They're kind of sold out on their floor. But here's the thing with Tua. Tua's been great this year. But are you convinced Tua is one of those quarterbacks that you pay, or one of those quarterbacks that are really useful only in their rookie deal? That's what you have to determine with Tua, right? That's where they're at. And that's the dilemma. Because Tua's good. Tua's not bad. But do you win if you pay Tua? I'm not sure, right? Does Tua elevate Tyreek Hill, or does Tyreek Hill elevate Tua? If Tyreek Hill is elevating Tua, which a lot of people are assuming, and I think that's a fair assumption because we looked at Tyreek Hill. I mean, we know what Tyreek Hill has done before his career. Granted, he's never had a bad quarterback, but we know what Tyreek Hill did with Teddy Bridgewater. It wasn't that much different than what he's doing now. And we know what Tua looked like before he got Tyreek Hill, which looks much different than it does now. So if Tua is not going to elevate Tyreek Hill, how can you justify paying him twice as much? So if you don't think, and I go back to this all the time, if you as a fan base aren't convinced that signing your quarterback to a long-term deal is a no-brainer decision, then you don't have a quarterback. Not long-term. You got a guy that you can keep on your rookie deal, but not long-term. Like if you aren't 100% convinced, because when I ask Bills fans about Josh Allen, no doubt. Okay. When I ask Bengal fans about Joe Burrow, there's not a doubt in their mind. He's the dude. We're going to give him the money. We're going to do this thing, right? You start asking about Tua, Justin Herbert, no doubt. Tua, I don't know. I got to see it another year. I don't know. Maybe it's the system. And it starts to sound like the Baker Mayfields of the world. It starts to sound like the Jalen Hurts of the world. It starts to sound like the Kirk Cousins of the world. It starts to sound like the Dakota Prescotts of the world. Like the guys that are good, but the second they started to get paid was also the second you saw the ceiling on the team no longer being the Super Bowl. It's tough. It took Matt Stafford in that contract to age so long and then a different team for him to be a Super Bowl champion. Like those dudes, they're good to have. They're good quarterbacks. But like, if you can get a guy like Lamar, which most people in Baltimore, no brainer, wanted to keep him, but Baltimore didn't. So maybe they know something. Maybe the fans know more, right? But the fact is that people have a much higher ideal of the ceiling of Lamar Jackson and any team that he's on than any team Tua is on. And if you have a chance to get Lamar, you would go with Lamar. Now, where I think Lamar is ultimately going to end up? Anywhere that's willing to pay. He could be in Houston, dog. He can be in Tampa. He could be in Philly. He could be, well, I don't know if he ends up in Philly. But, I mean, like, don't you see Lamar Jackson as an upgraded Jalen Hurts, right? So maybe he could end up in Philly. That would be rough for Jalen, but, like, it's the game, man. The same game that's being played on Tua getting played on him. And it's the same game that got played on him at Alabama, ironically enough. It can get played on him. He could be in Atlanta. I don't think there's a front runner yet. But I don't think Baltimore's going to do it. I think they're going to use this year's justification, even though they're going to be in first place and probably lose in the second round of the playoffs. Jonathan Ross says, hypothetically, will AB structure the roster with $9 million before the start of 23? Here's why I always tell fans, and this is what I'm going to say to you, Jonathan. We can't make any assumptions about the salary cap. If anything has been proven to us over the last few years, is that we can't make any assumptions about the salary cap because we don't know what moves they're going to make to free up space. We don't know what rules are going to trigger what when it comes to salary cap space. And we don't know what they've been hiding when it comes to salary cap space. This thing is a mystery. I'm not going to pretend to know it, but we will have a better idea once free agency starts on what the Browns cap situation actually is. Right now, we're using projections. We're guessing. We have no idea. It's not even useful to talk about because we're not even close to knowing what the actual number is going to be. So I will leave all that for a later time. Dale with a question says, what was the internal rift between Watson and the Texans, and do you see that happening in Cleveland? Not with this current regime. Because the difference between, I would even use like the Baltimore Ravens as an example. The Browns, you can criticize the Browns all you want for making the trade. You can criticize the Browns and this regime all you want for what their record has been. But what you cannot criticize this team about is their urgency to get pieces around the quarterback position. You just can't. You can't look at this roster and tell me that they have not supported the quarterback position well. That's why I called BS on everybody when, they were mad about the Baker Mayfield thing, saying the Browns are a trash organization that didn't set up Baker Mayfield for success, when Baker Mayfield has been the most set up for success quarterback in his draft class. You can argue that the Browns did more to put pieces around him than the Bills did for Josh Allen. Certainly, than what the Ravens have done for Lamar Jackson. And then you can go, what? Sam Darnold, they did more. Josh Rosen, absolutely, right? Like every quarterback in that draft class, out of all of them since 2018, Baker got Odell. Baker almost had Amari Cooper. Like Baker got Jarvis. Baker got a offensive line upgrade. Like he got everything, the tight end, all of it. They did everything they could to support the quarterback position since 2018. What went wrong with Watson and the Texans? They traded DeAndre Hopkins. It's as simple as that. They traded DeAndre Hopkins. They weren't good the next year. He didn't want to play there anymore. The Browns, with this regime, have proven that they understand the importance of building around the quarterback position and getting pieces around the quarterback. That is why I think Cleveland was attractive. On top of the money, on top of everything else. That is that they demonstrated for the last 5 years when they thought they could have somebody maybe. We're going to put everything around you. Same thing with Watson, right? What went wrong with Tom Brady in New England? He was not convinced that they were trying to put pieces around him. That's going to be what drives a rift between the quarterback and any team. This regime has proven that that's not a problem for them. They are willing to make the sacrifices. They are willing to be aggressive in the areas in which they need to be aggressive in to be able to build around the quarterback position. And I think that's why this was ultimately an attractive long-term fit for Deshaun Watson. Jonah with the question, hey, Q, do you think we'll see design QB runs for Watson in this game? I think either at the beginning of a drive, of the first drive, or in the red zone of the first drive. I wouldn't be surprised if his first touchdown is a running touchdown. I think they'll do that early just to get him used to contact. He hasn't been like he played in that preseason game. He didn't get hit in that preseason. I don't know when the last time he got hit on a football field was. So you're going to want to get him used to contact, get him used to remembering how to fall and take hits and all of that. And maybe that's what they're most concerned about because that's really how you avoid injuries in the NFL is when you know how to fall. And I don't know how much preparation Deshaun has been doing behind the scenes on like learning how to fall or relearning how to fall and take hits and stuff like that. Because that's the one thing you can't really prepare for when you're not playing live contact football. But I think, yeah, you'll see some runs early on just to get him used and comfortable, and especially in the red zone so he doesn't have to make like a bunch of quick decisions early in the game when he might be rusty, especially in the red zone because that means turnover sometimes. OE Club says, do you think Watson will be able to lead the league in passing yards again, especially now that he has a team with Nick Chubb? I would argue that you really don't want Deshaun Watson to be leading the league in passing yards. One, I think leading the league in passing yards is one of those fraudulent titles. Like, I know he's won it before, but like Big Ben has done it. Jameis Winston has done it. Like, it's a bit more fraudulent how you can get there, and it sometimes ends up to being usage, and I don't think you want Watson's usage to ever be that high. So I would think that they want to avoid that. When it comes to him leading the league in passing yards, I would say probably not, and I think that's actually a good thing. The next question comes from Steven, says, how do you think how rusty Deshaun Watson might be, and are people not thinking enough of the fact he's coming in week 13 without any wear or tear on the season, and he'll be the healthiest he's on the field Sunday? Not just that, right? I think there's a lot of factors that you can come into thinking about. One of the other things, I was listening to Jake Burns on the Browns OBR report. Check it out on Spotify. It's a great podcast. It's what I listen to. He was talking with his guest, and I think his guest brought up that, you know, Watson has been at home and he knows exactly what time that he's coming back from the suspension. So he knew what teams he had to prepare for. So he's also had 11 weeks, not just to, you know, further cement the offense in his head, look at what teams are doing to the Cleveland Browns system and what parts are going to be the same. He also had 11 weeks to look at the Texans defense and how they play. Also had 11 weeks to look at Pittsburgh, you know, Cincinnati, Baltimore, the Saints, and then who else is in that mismatch? The Commanders, right? So he's been able to watch those teams play, see what they do, see what they don't do, see what defensively they're trying to do, and watch those things with the watchful eye, knowing that he's going to play them later on this year. So I think that also factors into this. Yes, the rusty thing, that's going to be the main topic of conversation. But when somebody doesn't play football for 700 days, the amount of the amount of good things from not playing a game that violent for 2 years that it does for your body, and the amount of bad things that you're going to have because you're mentally not prepared to play a game because you just haven't done it in a while, are a sea of things that I don't think one specific factor outweighs the other. It's just going to be what happens. Whatever happens on Sunday is going to be what happens. And honestly, that's going to dictate how everybody feels about this, right? Because if he has a great game, it's going to be, well, he had those 11 weeks to prepare for the Texans and all, and we're going to see that spin on it. If he has a terrible game, you'll see the rust. So you see how, like, I don't think the rust is what's important here. I don't think there's one important thing. I think the game is just going to be what the game is, and people are going to make of that what they want to, given the result, if that makes sense, Stephen. The next question comes from Fat Boy Season, who says, shout out to you, man, who says, any indicator of Farrell Brown getting more opportunities over Bryant, or is the belief with his previous report with Brown in Houston? Well, Farrell Brown is in a unique situation, right? Because he's not only familiar with this offense, he's not only familiar with the Cleveland Browns, he's also familiar with the Houston Texans. Like, he has been on the Browns multiple times. Very recently, I think he was on the Browns in 2019. Right, he was on one of them Baker Mayfield teams, and then he was in Houston with Deshaun Watson the last couple of years. Deshaun Watson was there. Well, the last year Deshaun Watson was there, so they also have a rapport. And I want to point out that there's been a couple of games this year where it's only been Harrison Bryant and Farrell Brown, and Farrell Brown has gotten a decent amount of targets, like 2 or 3, right? So I don't think it's incredibly wild to think that he's going to get targets, especially if Harrison Bryant has some drop issues early on, which he usually has, right? So that's why I think Farrell Brown might have a bit better of a game, or opportunity to have a better game, than what people might be assuming. The next question comes from Jackson, who says, what player do you think will benefit from Watson the most? This is a good question. I would say, I don't know, the individual player is tough because so many people are going to benefit. I would say somebody like, I don't know, maybe Donovan Peoples-Jones, DPJ, or really I think it's David Njoku, but he's not playing in this game. But I'll go David Njoku because Deshaun's really good at finding his tight ends. So I'm going to go David Njoku there. But that's it for this week's Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.